and that was fabulous. But I have to tell you that the gentleman you're about to hear from is the reason 80 to 90% of the good work gets done at the Seattle-King County Workforce Development Council. Dan Fye and I have worked together for 15 or 16 years, somewhere in there, and he serves as my chief operations officer, and he really does make the trains run on time. He really does come up with the fabulous ideas for some of the grant proposals that we submit and sometimes are successful with, and he really does supervise the staff and create a great workforce culture both in our internal workforce board and around our system of WorkSource around King County. So I am humbled to get to work with this man every day, and I think you're going to really enjoy hearing from Dan Fye, my COO.
Wow, thanks a lot. I'm speechless. I have to come all the way to Vancouver for that. Thanks for having me, and thanks for tolerating what I'm about to do to you in terms of a conversation around grant funding strategies to find some core funding to fund the programs you've heard about at this conference, linking workforce and economic development. I have the real pleasure of living in a mad world of grant development and writing lots of grants, and have done that for the better part of 16 years. And I have things that have gone catastrophically wrong, things that have gone really well. I learned something from every strategy we do. And what I want to offer you today is a window into that world and that experience, and I'd like to make some suggestions for you all to help you continue to do the good work you're doing and find good grant strategies. So that's my intent today, and we'll go through this and see where it takes us. And please think of those questions as you go along, because I'd like this to be kind of interactive and fun as you're eating and then winding up this great conference. And now I'm realizing I should probably have figured out how to advance my slides before I got up here and started speaking. Behold. Excellent. So I wanted to start with some assumptions and context of what I'm going to say, because I need to park this conversation in a very limited experience, and I'd like you to just know that before we go forward. And one is the goal of every grant that the Workforce Development Council of Seattle-King County pursues, seeks, and partners on in the community is really trying to link economic development and workforce development. We have two main customers in our world, and that's job seekers and business. And we're seeking to enhance economic vitality in our communities, business growth, business retention, business attainment into our community. And we want to make sure that we're supplying as much as possible a qualified, skilled, and competent workforce for those jobs. So all of this conversation is vectored on that main goal. I also put on the slide that not every region is the same, and I'm doing that because I recognize part of the context in what I'm saying to you today is from King County. And King County has the great benefit of having an amazing level of partnerships and resources, knowledge, skills, and abilities across multiple agencies. So what I'm sharing with you is through that lens. It is a very prosperous, dynamic community that's allowed us to do a lot of what I'm going to describe. But again, the foundational strategies I'm going to share with you, I think, are replicable to any community and any organization statewide. And what I want to say too is this thing that we're doing, or that I get to do, applies to both public, private, and corporate dollars. Those are really the three sources of funding that we seek to bring in to enhance our partners in our community. And predominantly what we get a chance to do is federal funding, but the strategy applies both to public, private, and corporate funding as well. Some numbers on the ride down today, which was on the train. I wasn't driving, otherwise I wouldn't have been able to do this work legally, is that I had a chance. I keep a list of all the grants we've written in the last decade that I've had a hand in on behalf of our board and Marlene, our ED, and I took the last 5 years, and we've applied for 20 private foundation grants, and we got 7 of them. That's a hit rate of about 35%. But that means what I want to signal to you is you've got to apply for a lot more than you're going to get. That's just part of the game. So, and 90% of success is showing up and keep trying. Federal, in the last 5 years, big federal grants, we've got 7 of 15 that we applied for, so hit rate of 46%. And across private dollars, state dollars, and federal dollars, have been able in that 5-year period through grants and grant strategies to bring in about just under $20 million competitively to our organization that we've been able to give to our community partners. I want to just reference here too, we're a small shop. We've got, I should know this since I'm the chief operations officer, but I don't, I'm off by a couple sometimes. But I think is Marlena still in the room? No. Good. Don't tell her I don't know this factor. But we've got something like 22 FTE total across our shop. So we're pretty lean. We keep something south of like 12% of an admin cost to do all this. So of the $20 million I just talked about that we're bringing in, the goal really is to push that money out into our community partners who do the good work. So it is a complete and utter kick in the pants to be able to work my tail off to get money in so that we can get money out to allow other agencies and partnerships to do more of what they're built to do. So we're really just a catalyst in the system. But you'll note that you have to apply for more than you get. So it's a constant process. I almost said next slide, but of course I'm the guy that's supposed to do that. Here's the second slide we were asked to do was barriers in fund development. What gets in the way? One is it's not easy being green. It's not easy being an intermediary organization. So the Workforce Development Council sits in the middle between job seekers and business. And I will tell you, when you're out seeking grants from corporations, federal sources, not so much, but definitely corporations and private philanthropies, no one really wants to fund a middleman or a middle person. There's just, it's hard to make the market case or the value proposition that you add value. And that is just one of those challenges that we've had to address over a number of years. And part of that is a communications issue that we need to document from our previous grants, the value that we've had on kind of a return on investment basis, so that when we're going for future grants, we can show that we do add that value. But grant development and fund development in your own shop should be very closely aligned, if not parked within your own communication strategies for your community. The second one is misperceptions and misunderstandings. So here's a quick story for context on this one. I have the good fortune of sending my wife and I, our little 6-year-old boy, Henry, to a private school in Seattle. Never thought I would do that. I'm a public school junkie, but for a variety of reasons we did it. And there are a number of families there that are of real substantial wealth. And I was intimidated, like, well, I'm not going to fit in. But one of the things as you go to these events and parties with some of these parents who work very high up in the corporate sector is a misperception both of an intermediary organization, but also I think a misperception of government. And this will probably not surprise you, but I was at a guy's night out with other parents at this school, and one of the fellows said, "Oh, you work for government. You work for a nonprofit organization. You're one of those guys that's a drag on the system. You don't put money in. You only take money out." Nice guy, and we went on with the conversation. But I referenced that point because every grant we write, I strategize with the intent that someone reading it may have that perception, and I have to prove them wrong. And I have 20 pages if I'm lucky to do it. But you have to think of your readers and your external audience and strategize and try and address misperceptions in the limited time you have in a grant. Third bullet down, tendency to be reactive and not proactive in fund development. Having done this for 15 years, we've gone through the whole cycle. I've been incredibly reactive on a number of grants. They just happen to come out, and then you think, well, I think we can do something. And we don't get those very often. But if we're proactive and we're thinking ahead, what does our community need funding for? What are the gap areas? Where are our partnerships strong enough and ready enough to implement something, then we launch on a fund in a grant drive, and those usually get funded, and they're a heck of a lot easier to implement, by the way. I'm going to tell you about implementation headaches in a minute. But if we thought about it ahead of time, they're a lot easier to implement. Unexamined and underdeveloped partnerships is a barrier in grant and fund development. We just have the good luck. I think part of it is just sticking around. Been here 15 years. Marlena's been here 15 years. You meet people, you meet them again. You develop that relationship, they stay around, and those relationships matter. When we go into a grant mode, in fact, James Blotz, who's in this audience and on our staff, will attest to, about a week ago, 2 weeks ago, we wrote a big federal grant, and we had 2.5 weeks to turn it around. And it was a $5 million grant, and we did it in 2.5 weeks. We would not have been able to move that out of our shop with all the federal requirements on that grant if we didn't already have the partnerships in the community and we started working the phone tree. People knew who we were, knew that we could do it, and trusted us and trusted the process. I would say in the early 2000s that wasn't there as much, so a lot of the grant time as the clock's ticking was spent trying to convince people to join on, and then we'd miss a deadline or be late, so that needs to be done in advance. Types of funding expectations, and funding shelf life. I will tell you, if you don't know already, the federal government has a lot of expectations on their funds. And not, buyer beware in the audience, some of you should manage those federal funds, some of you should run for the hills and don't do it. But get a sub-grant where someone else is the fiscal agent and giving you a small piece of it, but don't manage the whole thing. But having been able to get grants from the Paul G. Allen Family Foundation and some Seattle foundations and other private philanthropies, I always had the perception, well, they write you a check. This is the best thing ever. And they really do, by the way. This always blows me away. You write, I wrote a $150,000 grant to the Paul G. Allen Foundation. You get a check in the mail for $150,000. And I sit down and I look at it, and I look at it again. And I look at it a third time, I was like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Makes no sense to me because most of my life is in the federal world, which is all cost reimbursable. In fact, a dollar never sits in our shop for longer than probably 30 seconds before it moves on out into the community. So it's a very different world for us. But I will tell you, the philanthropic world has expectations too, but trickier expectations because they often build them and change them as they go. So that's part of the challenge of working in the philanthropic sector or having a philanthropic dollar because the expectations move. One thing I love about federal grants, the expectations are really clear up front. And once you've figured them out and know how to live within them, they don't change. And there's some peace of mind in that, I will tell you, because changing expectations are rough. And then lastly, creating a bubble for development work. There was a great fund developer in our community who has since passed away who gave me a lot of training over the years. Leah McCullough was her name, and she would always sit with me and say, if your organization's really going to do this and do this well, you've got to put a bubble around fund development because she said it's always the last thing organizations think of, and they always think of it late, and they always let the drive of the ordinary in their organization drive out the extraordinary. So whatever you do, and because you're the COO and you should be able to do this, you wall your staff off and you wall yourself off to get this done. Otherwise, you won't have $19 million to give to your community and do job training. And she was exactly right. It is a barrier and a challenge, I will tell you, in a fast-paced environment that we're in where needs are high and funding is low to create that bubble. But I want to encourage all of you, to the extent you're able to do that for your staff or for yourselves or your partners, it makes all the difference. It dials back the heat. But you have to be conscious, very conscious about trying to create that bubble in your environment to allow this good grant work to be done.